Greetings, you happily miserable accursed. It's Herle here with Teneycke, Reid, and Leichnitz. You know, if this political punditry thing doesn't work out, Teneycke, Reid, and Leichnitz has a future as Canada's sweariest, most aggressive, but still only moderately successful personal injury law firm. Teneycke, Reid, and Leichnitz.
I like that.
Yeah, would you like to be a lawyer, Scott?
I would like to be. I would like to be a litigator. I would like to swan throughout the crowd, and like present to the jury and say, just two words, my friends, not guilty. I just think that would be grand fun. The performative elements of the law,
The performative
which,
element.
or like
This
all
checks
other
out.
elements of all other professions.
Totally
Just the
checks
performative
out.
parts appeal to me.
I'm wearing a Costa Rica shirt, not because I'm going to Costa Rica, but because I fucking wish I was in Costa Rica. God, I'm miserable about the weather.
You guys are miserable about the weather. It's not that
I'm miserable
bad.
about
It's early, friends. It's early for misery.
And it wasn't
I
so
was
long
pretty
ago.
miserable this morning.
You went to Costa Rica, you broke your collarbone, smashed all of your ribs, collapsed half of your side, and convinced yourself that it was no longer time for you to be riding a four-wheeler, right? Did you guys know this?
No, my fucking
No.
yeah.
Dave went tits up on a four-wheeler on the side of a mountain in Costa Rica,
It's
and
not ideal.
it
But that might be a four-wheeler thing and not a Costa Rica thing.
It was. I tried to turn. I'd never driven one before. My brother goaded me into driving it
on a mountain.
Yeah,
great.
Because you're 12.
Yeah, and it was late afternoon. It was getting dusky, and I'm out there, and I within 2 minutes I was buying one of these things. They're just amazing to drive. And then I tried to turn it, and I rolled it on myself, and I was lying there under the thing, unable to move in any way, shape, or form, just waiting for the next animal to come along and hoping it would be a human, which is not a given. Right?
Not necessarily, right? Yeah.
No.
Go with the side-by-sides.
Yeah, howler monkey.
They're way safer.
Chew your balls off.
David is the reason
Leave you there.
that those warning stickers exist on the side of four-wheelers.
The two true death traps, rather, the three-wheelers. Do you remember those things, like from the 80s? Oh my God! Like I knew many a person who got
in Sterling, Ontario. They gave me one in
grade
grade 9 to bomb around at the international plowing match. I've never had three better days of my life.
They're like designed to maim and injure. Anyway, get a side by side. Tell your brother that. Get him one.
Yeah,
for
he
Christmas.
did. He did get a side by side, and he likes it a lot. You are, but before we talk again, you're going to be in Saskatchewan, Kory. You're going.
Yes. Home? Yeah. I will be. I'll be in the blessed land of Saskatchewan, Saskatoon, young Saskatchewan, all the good spots.
Yeah. That's when Kory and I always get stronger. When we go back to Saskatchewan, we can feel the original power, the original source.
You won't be there though. I enjoyed. It was a couple of years ago. We got together in like Christmas Eve what was it, 23rd or something? I forget.
23rd or something like that. We went to Gulfs and
shouldn't it weaken you? Like, isn't Saskatchewan a red sun solar system as opposed to when Superman gets close to Krypton, he's weakened. His powers are diluted. You're saying
I'm getting it's the opposite now. We gain energy.
In fact, if anything sucks the life force out of you, it is fucking Ottawa.
I'm gonna just prove just how common a touch David and I have and our connection to Saskatchewan. Here's the hack when you go back to Saskatchewan. Get the wine list at the nicest steakhouse you can find, and I guarantee you there are going to be bottles of wine there that no one will have bought since probably the 80s, and they'll be a fraction of the price of what they would be anywhere else because no one ever touches that stuff. So anyway, I think we had like a couple bottles of Opus One.
But don't drink them in the restaurant. Take them away from the restaurant.
Right.
Go up to your room. Yes. Phone Jimmy Baton at Tumbler's Pizza and order a pizza to your hotel room and drink some Camus and eat a fucking Regina pizza. That's what you should.
I would like.
Well, that does sound like a hell of a time, eh? I'm going to sit in my hotel room with an expensive bottle of wine that I bought for lower than market price and eat pizza by myself. Boy, you guys know how to party. I want to hang with you.
Well, we went and partied in the whatever the Royal Suite or whatever the nicest suite at this Hotel Sask is. which was a perfect place to do it because they'd had their Christmas party for their staff there the night before. So the thing smelled like an ashtray. So you could do whatever you wanted in there, and no one was going to complain.
All right, well, Kory, I expect you to come back with a bar.
Yeah.
Like,
very good. Yes.
At least a bottle of lemon heart, please.
I've still got 2 in my house that I bought you last time I was there, and we haven't.
I'm out.
I'm
out. So
I have a little reserve.
I'll be over in an Uber shortly.
All right. As you can maybe tell, listeners, we don't really have anything to talk about this week.
Yeah, there's nothing.
No.
Politics, what?
CBC had the CPC, not the CBC, the Conservative Party of Canada had a motion this week in which they tried to jam the Liberals on their MOU. Appeared to me they jammed themselves more than they jammed the Liberals, but we can talk about that. Here are the people's views on that. 2 days later, Michael Maw became the latest Conservative floor crosser, bringing the Liberals 1 seat shy of a majority. I was at a dinner party last night where it was vigorously contested whether MP should have the right to do this at all. So that's kind of interesting. Our cursed clipping is Campbell Clark's provocatively titled Globe piece, Potential Disaster Looms Over Pierre Poilievre's Leadership. And so I can just see all the comments on YouTube again. All you ever do is shit on Poilievre. All you ever do is crap on the Conservatives. Not that you ever say anything about Carney. Because Carney's doing well right now politically, and Poilievre is struggling politically. So that's why we talk about it. And when it reverses, we shall reverse.
Why don't you tell the truth, you Laurentian fat fuck? You guys never tell the truth. You've been bought and sold for by media-paying Liberal governments. You liberals.
Was that you?
Well, could be. I don't know. I'm sort of like I'm drifting into that lane. It feels like I'm.
What the fuck is your problem reading the comments?
It's
like,
you
my
get too much
favorite
time on your hands if you're going into the comments.
My favorite thing. It's my favorite thing.
Half of them are fucking bots, and the other half are
fantastic
folks who are just
a lot of them are the people you're going to meet when you're home in Saskatchewan.
It's fantastic.
Yeah,
I'm surprised there's room in your mouth for all those lies with Carney's dick and balls, Reid. It's unreal. It's all I get nonstop.
The old spinning wheel of doom that used to show up on your computer screen as it slowly buffered its way into doing what you wanted it to do in the first place. I know you hurly-burlyites remember it. Well, that thing has a name. Latency. The time it takes for a command to be processed or the transfer of data to actually happen. Lower latency is always better. And in the super complex computational world of AI, it's critical. Our presenting sponsor, TELUS's Sovereign AI Factory in Rimouski, features extraordinarily low latency, courtesy of the network that powers it, the TELUS Pure Fiber network. The result is the transfer of data between the factory and their customers happens so quickly, it feels instantaneous. Often, the limiting factor for AI computing isn't the nodes, those ultra-powerful computer neurons that handle trillions of calculations per second. It's the connection between the nodes. I mean, what good is the power and majesty of AI if the connective tissue bogs it down? If latency is high and the data can't be processed and shared to the customer? So again, it's down to the network. TELUS's ultra-fast, dedicated fiber routes ensure those large AI data sets and complex computations are transferred securely and processed efficiently across multiple locations. And as I think more about it, it strikes me that the Sovereign AI Factory itself is low latency in structural form. Our businesses, government, and researchers didn't have to wait for a Canadian-owned and operated AI facility to help lead the digital world. TELUS got there very quickly, indeed. Okay, well, let's start with this. I think one of the slightly more interesting things about this is that of all of the things that Tim Hodgson was expected to bring to this government, sort of partisan political maneuvering, I would have thought was pretty unexpected. And yet he's the guy that convinced Ma to come over, managed it in a way that the Conservatives did not see it coming for 1 second, and introduced him at the caucus Christmas party triumphantly. So quite a political move from Hodgson, Jordan.
Yeah, I was surprised by that too. I think if you had asked me to pick the person least likely to lead that sort of maneuvering, it would probably have been him. But, I think it's remarkable how ripe for the picking the conservative members seem to be. And if rumor is to be believed, even commentary from conservative MPs, which is starting to sound
That sounds strange, eh?
a little defeatist right now. That there is, there's more where that came from, and it made me think a lot this weekend also about, and I guess this is one of Paul Well's axioms here, but it's true that like the party that's having more fun, that is also sometimes a marker for success. And holy shit, the Conservative caucus seems miserable right now. Like, what a depressing place to be. And I think that part of why.
But why, Jordan?
Well,
why?
why
Like, it looks like they could win an election if it was out today.
But that's actually what's so depressing about it. It's because what these defections have sparked in Poilievre and the team around him has been like more paranoia, more kind of internal surveillance of each other. I think it's really worsened the atmosphere. One certainly has that sense from the outside anyway. And it's actually creating a bit of a downward spiral for them. And I think that some of that, of course, if you're coming up to a leadership review and you have people defecting, that is natural. But some of this is also being fed by Poilievre himself. And I think that you have a couple things going on with these defections. So like one, it's like not super fun to be in the Conservative caucus right now. And a lot of those people who ran in the last election didn't run to be backbenchers in an opposition party. They joined on when the party was 20 points ahead and had a clear path to victory. So it's not clear that they signed on for what's happening here. So their adhesion might not be super strong to start with. And then when you pile on the sort of negativity, paranoia, whatever it is that's going on in that caucus right now, it doesn't seem like a really appealing place to be, particularly when you have the prime minister of a Liberal government moving very much into progressive conservative territory and rolling out the welcome mat. I think that it's fascinating that Carney's building his majority entirely with conservative MPs. I find it very honest, at least. But it also shows the proximity now between the two parties in terms of orientation, in terms of policy solution. Like, people just are not viewing it as a huge leap, right? So there's a few problems for Poilievre here. And then to cap it all off, I think everybody saw his interview with Rosie Barton over the weekend, which was kind of astounding. Like, on the one hand, I guess good for him for going. But on the other hand, why would you go if that's all, if all you have to say is sort of these outlandish statements that contain absolutely no self-reflection about the situation that you are in charge of? So I thought that was a pretty interesting choice on his part, and maybe speaks to some of the maybe denial that is still present within his own thinking about what's happening, what's unfolding in front of him right now.
Right. All right, Kory, you're sitting there looking more than usual like the most interesting man in the world. But what do you think about all this?
Well, look, to our earlier comment about, people who might think we're, too hard on the Conservatives. I don't think the Conservatives are doing poorly. I think Poilievre is having some challenges, but I don't think the Conservatives are doing poorly. Yeah. Like the Abacus numbers, just going through them this morning that just came out, like it's kind of a dead heat on the party side. And, I think Abacus kind of overscores the Conservatives federally and provincially right now, or at least in Ontario. There's some methodological differences, but you could look at Leger. You could
they had a tie in Ontario, and I don't think that's true. But
yeah, I know it's not true. But you could look at Leger or Angus Reid or others. Like, look, when it comes to ballot, when it comes to party, when it comes to issues, the Conservatives are not just doing okay. Like, I think they're dominant on the issues that I think are going to be the bigger drivers for most of the electorate. So what's holding them back? Like, why is such a massive gap on leadership? And To Jordan's point, I think you saw some of it in that Rosemary Barton interview. Like, uh, just I don't know what to say. Like, I think Pierre could use some media training. Like, the the comportment, the body language, the like all of it was just like 15 degrees off center in terms of what you want to be doing, and and the tone was just, it's so defensive. It's, even when it doesn't need to be, like, there is a way to get through a floor crossing, and he's had, 2.5 at bats on that, and might have a couple more before all is said and done. The way to deal with it is more with a shrug than with this, like, sort of uh reading from a script of of a SO31 that you forced somebody to read, right? Like, it's a weird way of approaching that. I think it's overly
Kory,
defensive. I don't think it's good comms.
Kory,
Yeah.
when Davy Stewart was the leader of the Saskatchewan Liberal Party, and Colin Thatcher and a guy named Gary Lane defected from the Liberal caucus to the nascent Progressive Conservative caucus, and the media asked Davy Stewart for comment. His comment was that he thought it was tremendous for Saskatchewan politics because in one fell swoop they had increased the average IQ of both caucuses by 20%.
See, now that is a good response to a floor crossing. But, like, it's a shrug. But, like, where the floor crossers are happening, I think if you were to look at, all right, where is this going next, if we want to move the story forward here, they're losing people in swing seats. They're losing people who are kind of on the bubble. Like Markham Unionville, it's as swingy a swing seat as you're going to find in the province of Ontario. They lost, they can talk about how inconsequential losing their final MP from Nova Scotia is, but it's your final MP in Nova Scotia, right? Like, this isn't good. Like, the battle line is clearly on the front lines, and I'd be spending a lot of time looking at all those ridings where that you barely won, and I'd be spending a lot of time with those guys, making them feel the love, and women. But it's not great. But on one hand, but there's a lot there to work with. There's a lot that is going well for the Conservatives. If they could just figure out the leadership stuff, if Poilievre, and I don't think Poilievre has to become perfect, but he has to, learn some of the obvious lessons here, and show that he's learned them. But, like, going on Rosemary Barton and just being a massive fucking prick is not the way.
It's not like I'm going to say anything new here, but let me say it anyway. This is really important. When you hear people like me talk about the spirit of giving this holiday season, it doesn't just mean giving to relatives and friends who, let's face it, often don't need more stuff. Giving means helping, donating to a food bank or to a charity, helping. For many people, the holiday season is cold and just as difficult as any other time. They need your help. And if you want to make sure 100% of your financial donation goes to those in need, I have a suggestion. The CN Employees and Pensioners Community Fund. You don't have to be affiliated with CN to contribute. Every cent the fund collects goes to help the less fortunate, with a focus on sick children. CN pays all the fund's administrative costs and matches donations to certain activities. Last year, the fund raised $2.13 million. Since its creation, it has raised nearly $20 million. A couple of examples of where the money goes. The Lighthouse Children and Families Organization, a palliative pediatric home that cares for terminally ill children and the psychological health of their families. Or the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario, whose work is self-explanatory. I don't know about you, but I cannot think of a worthier cause than helping and caring for sick children. And a pledge on behalf of a family member is a lovely, beautiful gift. It may sound cliche, but giving really is its own reward. The CN Employees and Pensioners Community Fund accepts cash, credit cards, and payroll deductions, and issues full tax receipts. Give, people, give. It will make your holiday all the warmer, knowing you've helped a child fighting diseases that can shatter innocence and families. I don't think you're saying what you actually think, because you can't learn these things. Right?
Well,
you can't, like, his character is what it is. His personality is what it is.
Well,
formed after a long time.
Sure. Yeah. Well, okay. Let me address that. Like, look, it is true. I do like this to point out that, well, we have done heart transplants and liver transplants and kidney transplants. Medical science is yet to successfully do a personality transplant. It has not happened yet successfully anywhere in the world, as far as I'm aware. That said, I do remember putting, Stephen Harper in sweater vests and, having him do ads with kittens and shit like that. You can, bend the curve on what you're doing. Like, it's not like the only two options are full personality transplant or nothing at all.
Right.
Like, there are more options on the menu than that. So, like, yes, I believe that a personality transplant is possible? No, not that we've seen. Medical science is yet to provide an example of one. That said, from a marketing perspective, we have all helped a number of candidates look like less of a prick than they actually are in real life. Like, that is, I think, standard fare, and there are ways to do that. But like, it doesn't, I don't feel like anyone is giving Poilievre accurate notes on what his performance is like. And if they are, he's obviously not listening. But like, it's one or the other. But there's, I'm not seeing any arc here other than the decision to do these interviews themselves. But to Jordan's point, if you're going to do the interview and nothing else changes, I'm not sure that you're doing yourself the favors that you think you are.
Right. So, Scott, what do you think's going on in there inside that caucus? In that they are competitive in the polls, and it's an old Liberal government that they almost beat, and they looked like they could beat it if an election happened again. Why are they falling apart? Why aren't they knit together?
I don't think they have confidence in Poilievre. I mean, not exclusively, not universally, but I think there has to be some sincere within the caucus, some sincere body of opinion that he's not able to get them to the promised land. And I'll just go back to something that Jordan said. To me, it's one of the little tidbits of the week that matter. I understand that Steve McKinnon's going to give a scrum and say, listen, there could be other conservatives coming. I'm not hearing from a lot of them. They're not very happy. That's just good fun piling on. If you're the House leader, who knows? It could all be bullshit, but, it gets a headline, you have fun. And then you go knock down a couple drinks and you're like, fuck, man, I've had a great day. What's wrong with that? But when you get a couple of conservatives saying to media, and we don't know who they are and it could be whatever, but you get a couple of conservatives saying to the media, we expect there could be at least two more. Like, who is saying that? And why are they saying it? That to me isn't that
because they're in caucus and they're hearing it. And
two out of how many? What's the max?
So why are they saying that? Like, they must think that that's the case. So I am actually starting. First of all, I just want to pile on the one same point that everybody else has made. Like, I know that a bunch of, like, to the degree to which we are representative of the insider bullshit bubble class of Ottawa and politics, noses way too close to the window pane of every little thing that happens in Ottawa and politics and so forth. All right. I gotta say, I think we still have enough distance to ask the question objectively. Why are you going on Rosie Barton? I know that everybody said, don't boycott the media and slag the mainstream media and all that sort of stuff. But that's not a strategy. That's a half strategy. Going on with mainstream media is not going to achieve anything if you're going to maintain the same brittle, deep denial tone. Like, you're not achieving anything. You're not actually going to be persuading the audience that you have already. You're not going to persuade the audience you don't have. You're not persuading the CBC audience. It just made no sense to me. And when she's like, ask him in the most reasonable voice imaginable, CMPs, and does that say something about your leadership? No, it says something about Mark Carney's leadership. It says something about I gave people the chance to vote for me. I was going to axe the tax and build the boat and gives it back to Lisa, but they wouldn't say yes, those fucking voters. So it's Mark Carney who has the problem. Because all my failure is going to rise up in one giant cloud of resentment and overwhelm him and fog his mind with overconfidence. We've got him right where we want him.
The line, like you're getting into it there, but the line of, well, I'm going to tell you what Canadians voted for last time, and this is the number one thing that Carney said he was going to do, and this is the number one promise he made, and it's kind of a twist on that, a spin on that. I just don't understand going on TV and telling people what they voted for.
Yeah.
And like what that is, like I just don't understand that as a political marketing strategy. I don't really think I don't really think I've ever seen it before, or at least not effectively used, where you are like basically lecturing voters as opposed to allowing them to make conclusions, like draw a contrast.
Yeah.
Like put yourself on the side of voters. But it sounds more like you like dictating to voters what they voted for and why and all of that, which is it's lecturing tone. I just like fuck, I don't get it. I don't understand it.
What's also so interesting about it to me, that's a tell of I think where he's at, is it's also relitigating the last election. Like he is so backwards focused in terms of how he's messaging, and I think that's a reflex for him, but you can see him time and again revisiting kind of the scene of the crime there, because that was for him.
Well, I'm not over my defeats either, so I get it. But it is not constructive.
A sitting leader where you are the drag on your party, right?
Right.
Like I still think on an over-under, it's looking pretty good for the Conservatives next election. The problem right now is very clearly with Poilievre. And I think, Kory, to your point about things that can be done to soften his comm strategy, that's absolutely true. But for those of us who've done that with leaders, the leader has to be aware that there's a problem. And I think that you can see in the senior Conservative team, they've made important staffing changes. So, bringing Steve Outhouse in, and they've made other staffing changes. You can see that they've changed their policy on media. So there's things happening, but they are more at the edge of the leader rather than coming from the leader. So I think, to me, that remains the big gap, is what is his own understanding about what's happening here?
It's a conservative,
and how that's blocking his ability to change.
It's a conservative version of forgetting Sarah Marshall. He just can't get fucking over it. Next thing you know, he's going to be composing a Dracula musical. It's getting to that stage. I want to say one thing though. I think that in a weird, perverse way, I think he might be right about something. And I do think that there's I got to sound like such a dink here, such a goof, but I think there's a trick of timing, and I think there is a risk in a weird way for Carney. Of course you want your cake. Of course you want more floor crossers. Of course you want to get your majority, but you want to eat it too. And I don't think there's anything more valued, more valuable, worth its weight in political gold than an opponent you can beat. And don't make the Poilievre mistake. Don't drive Poilievre out of his spot in the same way that Poilievre drove Trudeau out of his spot. I want Poilievre weak but present if I'm Carney. And so I look at what's happening now and I say, do not hammer this guy now. Don't like fire two more caucus members in the majority. First of all, that's going to boomerang, and people are going to really begin to have a legitimate question as to whether it's appropriate that a majority ought to be secured through floor crossers. And what does that say about representative?
Nobody gives a fuck about that.
You know what? It'll be an unwelcome discussion that will start to take over, and not take over, but will occur. But more importantly, you want to play this thing out where Carney goes into that leadership review and he secures 77-ish, 80% support, largely from the convoy Conservatives who were there, right? And you got some of those like progressive Conservatives who are still left in the caucus. You have a couple of people who ran, as Jordan said in the last time, thinking they were going to be part of a government. You got a bunch of those Quebec MPs, as in particular. We know a couple of those names have been watching. And they watch the convoy anti-vax crowd sustain his leadership and prop him up. And they go, I don't feel that fucking home, man. Then they go, you want him to feel like, I've received my mandate. It is absolute ironclad. Then you get a couple more defections. So you get your majority, but you get him in there. He continues to fight. And yeah, there's a possibility of getting reformed. But at some point, all the doubters have moved on and they've moved over. But like, so I think you want to play this carefully. Obviously, you want the majority. That's the name of the game. But like, don't outsmart yourself and don't outfox yourself with too much too fast. Take and eat it too.
Now that the countdown to the holiday is just shy of single digits, I present to you this All I Want for Christmas list from our sponsor, the Canadian Climate Institute. It's pretty succinct. Just one item. Effective climate policy that's better for consumers. Basically, that means more of the technologies and benefits that come from electrification. Many of these products you're already familiar with: electric vehicles, heat pumps, solar power, batteries, etc. These electric technologies are not only more modern and just better than their fossil fuel predecessors, they can also add up to savings, either right up front or over their life cycle. Take EVs. In a massive survey of Canadian EV drivers, more than 16,000 of them, the CAA found that nearly 90% would buy another one in the future. A similar number said the fuel savings and maintenance costs are much better than gas-powered cars. And while upfront sticker prices can still be a barrier, these costs keep coming down. In the view of the Climate Institute, governments can help on this front and should stay the course on cost-effective policies like the Fed's EV mandate. It can help make EVs both more affordable and available, meaning greater consumer choice with more models on offer and lower costs for better products. The same holds true for other electric technologies, like heat pumps. These technologies are incredibly energy efficient, so people save big on their energy bills. Across Canada, heat pump adoption has been rising. 9% of households now use them as their main source of heating. In the Maritimes, that number goes up substantially, to a range of roughly 30 to 50%. Again, according to the Climate Institute, governments can help reduce the upfront costs here to help Canadians realize substantial savings on their energy bills. Climate policy cheer, if I've ever heard it. More next week. So, Kory mentioned that abacus poll, and it went through all the issues. I'm sure we've all looked at it.
Yep.
Which party has credibility on which issues, right? And given what appears to be freaking obvious in that poll, why are the Conservatives having difficulty landing on an attack on Carney?
Why are they having difficulty? Well, because a lot of what he's doing are, frankly, conservative policies and conservative, traditionally conservative ideas or ideas of conservative support. So, like bail reform, long overdue. The Liberals should take a hell of a beating from the electorate for having, put the country in the position where the problem got so out of hand. But the Conservative caucus, and I think most conservatives and their conservative premiers and others, I'll support the bail reform that was brought forward. And, if we're talking pipelines, like, look, he had to, pull out from the motion one piece of it, but, 95% of the Liberal MOU, the Conservative caucus can support. And like that's the challenge. Carney is running a Stephen Harper government for the most part. And so
that's kind of based on ideology, Kory, but affordability remains a gaping vulnerability for this government.
Sure it does. But like to what extent is that what's driving the electorate? I think it has huge potential. I think the Liberal government, like any government that's been in office that long, has worn out its welcome with a lot of Canadians. Are skeptical of it. So, here's what I think Poilievre's got to be worried about. As these other changes are made, Jordan referenced a number of them, like bringing in Steve Houthouse, doing other things, where you're trying to address that. And if at the end of that, what there's a big red circle drawn around is popularity and support and likability of your leader, and that is the only thing that is holding you back, man, oh man, that circle, that red circle, it starts having a line vertical and a line horizontal through it, and it starts looking like the crosshairs, politically speaking. And I think he could end up being even more vulnerable at the end of that. Poilievre has to not just look at the horse race numbers. He's got to make sure that he is not the reason why the party is not moving forward. And I think that there's lots of indications of what he needs to do that. He needs to tone down the nasty. He needs to demonstrate that he has, some self-reflection and can that he can tact and pivot. I think that stuff's very important to caucus. Because if caucus ultimately, no matter what its result is in the leadership vote in January, if caucus continues to be as skeptical as they clearly are about his ability to lead the team, they will find a new leader of the team. And I agree with Scott. If the people who should be running to his defense more than anyone, if his numbers are where they are right now, is actually the Liberal caucus. It's actually the Liberal Party.
Yeah. So let's take this moment to just inject Campbell Clark's thoughts into this conversation from his piece in the Globe. Here's some excerpts from it. Party insiders still think Mr. Poilievre will sail through the leadership review vote in Calgary at the end of January. But another defection would have to make it a little more dicey. Even worse for the Conservatives is the prospect that Mr. Poilievre's victory would be followed by more defections, leaving him weakened. Potential political disaster is now hanging over Mr. Poilievre, threatening to fall on his head at any time. Now that there have been 2 defections, there is pretty unshakable evidence that something has gone wrong in Mr. Poilievre's Conservative Party. His job, after all, is leader, and leading an opposition caucus is, in large part, about keeping it together. There have long been tales of Conservative MPs chafing under the heavy-handed diktats of Mr. Poilievre's leadership, notably those from his former top campaign strategist and constant advisor, Jenny Byrne. Mr. Poilievre's leadership is dangling on a nervous string. He can't be sure that winning a leadership review vote means it's over. Even then, there will still be the fear that one more defector could spell the end.
Right? Yeah, the biggest risk to him remains his caucus over the long run, and I think that's even truer today.
Nonsense.
Yeah, you could be Michael Chong, but there's other ways to go too, right? And I think that you could sail through in January, as Kory says as well. It matters who is delivering that victory at the convention. And then you could end up still being hung out to dry by your caucus. And that would not be a surprising outcome. But, I really agree. I think that there is a danger here for Carney and the Liberals. Poilievre is very weakened right now. He's probably, in a lot of ways, the best possible opponent for this government. And you want to be careful how much you push. Because if he leaves, what the numbers are showing is that the vehicle of the Conservative Party remains very viable. But I think for Poilievre, you don't even have to look at defections to have alarm bells ringing. You can go to those favorability numbers, and if you look since the election in April, the trend lines are really clear. It has been getting worse steadily for him since April, not better. So what he has done with the time that's been afforded to him since the election is actually worsen his impressions among Canadians about his leadership. So I think that the window for him choosing a different tactic may be closing because he's demonstrated no ability to do that. He's said the words a couple times, but there's no change at the heart of what he's actually doing.
I don't think there's any change possible in that guy.
But that's really, that will become the question. We're about to see, right?
Like, I think he's willing to change things that aren't him, right? Like he's willing to make a change. Steve Outhouse instead of Jenny Byrne. He was willing to.
Although Campbell seems to think that Jenny's still around by the reference to that.
Well, I think to a certain extent, Jenny will always be around because the nature and tightness of that relationship is indelible. Like it's not something that's ever going to completely go away. But what is that? Or having Ian Todd be the chief of staff. I think on an operational level, I think she is gone in terms of, dealing with caucus on a day-to-day basis, right, okay. All of that stuff. I think that's all can be taken at face value. Mm-hmm. But, do they still talk? I would assume the answer to that is yes. But there's a symbiosis there that I think is, will be enduring. But, you can change media strategy and a bunch of other things. But if you don't change how you approach your own communications, when that is actually, what the stumbling point is, That's a problem. And what Jordan said about things getting worse, there are indications that things are getting worse in terms of locking in a negative branding with over half the electorate. And your accessible voters with you at the helm, uh, they have to increase if you're gonna be successful in what is essentially a two-party race. He's got to soften his image if they want to win, is my view. And so yes, it's important to communicate more through mainstream media. I think that's true. But if you're not providing some space for those people that you want to attract to your voter coalition to see themselves in you and your leadership, then I think you have a problem. And I think the best way for him to do that, because I don't think he's going to change a lot, is you got to have more characters in the cast on stage, right? Keep talking about an Avengers movie, not a Superman movie, and that we really haven't seen, other than Andrew Scheer, who I would argue makes it worse,
the
not
world's
better.
least likable
Keep it
politician.
up. Love him. Like him to be on TV all day, every day.
If you've ever tried to bake that perennial holiday favorite, the fruitcake, you'll understand how important it is to get the mix right. The same can be said for our tax system. If you rely too much on one form of taxation to raise revenues, like corporate and income taxes, it can result in unintended consequences for our economy. That's why our sponsor, CPA Ontario, wants to see Canada get the tax mix right. In their report, Tax Reform for Growth in Canada, they point to Canada's over-reliance on corporate and personal income taxes that impose a high economic cost. Instead, CPA Ontario builds the case for a different tax mix, one that will help drive future growth, competitiveness, and prosperity. And that matters, because according to a survey of CPAs, bold tax reform is one of the ingredients that Canada needs to attract investment, support entrepreneurship, and build a stronger Canada. Visit cpaontario.ca/tax reform to learn more about why Canada needs tax reform. Scott, neither you nor I have changed our personalities over the course of our lives, despite repeated evidence that we would be more successful if we did.
Some quite violent interventions in my case.
There are petitions for you to change your personality.
I've been strongly invited by family, former spouses, all sorts of
we're pretty close
strangers
to a
on the street
for Scott, actually.
But which actually gets at the point I was going to make, which people can point to Jenny and Campbell can mention her name and all, and I'm sure their relationship means that she's always only a phone call away. But the issue is him, and I'll throw out a slightly different perspective in that I think what I detect is a guy who's lost his confidence, and I've sort of mentioned this a couple times before. Like, I think the guy, he looks to me like a guy who, as we are joking, but it's not so damn funny if you're him, lost the last election and is really dealing with the emotional trauma of that. And I wouldn't underestimate it, because I have lived through it, and I wasn't even the leader, and I fucking was. Well, I went to a dark place for a long time. Arguably have not ever left it. And but in addition to that, like when I see him on Rosemary Barton, and I see a guy who actually has lost a little bit of his confidence. He's now, for the first time ever, doubting himself, and as a consequence, he defaults to two things. One, always projects strength, which actually is counterproductive in this case, because it's what causes him to say, "No, it's Mark Carney's fault," in that interview clip. And second, I think he directs the message back to his sort of traditional instinct. So when you say, well, God, with all this material they have to work for, if you look at the Abacus poll, why aren't they able to come up with a compelling argument? I think he finds it hard in a world where he's kind of lost some of his mojo to move off of what he knows and is familiar. I think he's feeling that he's lacking confidence, and he needs a horse whisperer. He needs a batting coach, and I don't know who is. I don't know if Steve Outhouse can provide that. I don't know, but like, as long as he looks this uncertain and digs himself as deeply into this message track as he is, like, Mark Carney said he was going to fix everything and he hasn't, therefore he's failed, and that's what Canadians expected. I don't actually think that's what Canadians did expect. I don't think that's what they are expecting. That's why that's not tracking. Like, I am literally genuinely beginning to think that this guy's not going to survive. Just as strong as the numbers are for the party and the brand, I I think, if he's handed a win
Scott, how do you get thrown out when there's no alternative? Like, I have not heard
that raises
one
an
name
interesting
mentioned.
question.
I've not heard one name mentioned by anybody.
But what if if the membership is still overwhelmingly the folks he signed up in the kind of post-pandemic angry protest phase, if they still represent hundreds of thousands of memberships in the party, what would that party produce as a leader and a leadership alternative? So maybe our assumption, which I share with Jordan, that, he's the best thing the Liberals have going. I don't know. Like, maybe they wouldn't move to somebody that's a progressive conservative, what us, mainstream losers, lamestream folks say. Maybe they would actually just go, what?
But I think it changes
we're
the
going
calculus.
BC Conservative Party. We're going full hard.
But you have people who might be looking to go provincial right now who then wouldn't. Like, I think it shifts all the pieces on the playing board.
Kory's the only one who has a new insight.
Well, there are a number of people who would run, and who I think are in their own way positioning for it. But I don't think one of them's Doug Ford, just to make that explicitly clear. But yeah, there are people. But look, maybe there's also something around affordability and the economy and all of that. Like, I'll come back to this. You need to have other voices. Like, if your two spokespeople are Pierre Poilievre and Andrew Scheer, two guys who have never drawn a paycheck, for most of their life from anyone other than the government of Canada, are those your most credible people to put in the window?
Honorable mention to Melissa Lantsman, who also pours gasoline on the fire more often than not.
Right. So Scheer is number 2, and she's number 2.5, and then there's nothing after that.
Right.
Like, they haven't put together that kind of a team that you're talking about, Kory. I heard David Cochrane say that their finance critic, whom I've met, seemed like a nice fellow, did not do interviews on budget day.
Yeah, that's a real problem, right? But look, I look at people who've played an instrumental role here in downtown, Toronto, who do have credibility. So, take Mark Mulroney, for instance. I would be, putting him out there, or trying to get him to run in a by-election or something. Like, you got to find some bigger names who have some credibility. Shuv Majumdar, if you want to talk about, foreign affairs stuff, I think he's a legit guy who's, done a lot of that stuff. I would be talking about, putting him forward more. Dare I say it, that, even Jamil Javani, who I've got, I've had issues with in the past, has some profile and has some comms chops. So look, there are people there who have a following.
What do you think about his profile. Charlie Kirk tour?
Yeah, I think Giovanni's such a net negative for them.
Well, you say no one's running for leadership. I would say he's showing all the signs.
Okay, all right.
But Kory, I have a question for you, and a legit question. I assume that those signups, the hundreds of thousands, whatever it was, 300,000 signups or whatever they did in the pandemic, that generated the leadership win, such overwhelming numbers for Poilievre. I assume that they have recaptured as many as they can in order to re-up their membership for the leadership review. And would that mean that if 2 months later, say, or something after that review, if he got reformed and was dumped by the caucus and there was a leadership, would that cohort not be more energized and angered and feel betrayed? And would they not control the selection? Or am I wrong in that? Would someone else come in?
I think the least talked about but most significant change in who will select the next leader for the Conservative Party is private sector unions. They are infinitely larger numerically and in organization and political proven political organizational heft than any of the weirdos and radicals on the Convoy crew, who are split, by the way, pretty evenly between the left and the right, between the placenta eating, pharmaceutical companies are trying to kill me crowd, that are more in, Jordan's tribe, and the, privatized.
Oh no, they don't vote.
It's all she rattles on about at dinners.
Privatized the sidewalks and nuclear weapons crowd, and that are split between the Conservatives and Max Bernier. But like, look, there is that cohort exists, but like, fuck, it's it's a few percent of the Canadian population. Look,
But is it 80% of
peak,
the membership?
Yeah, I
it's
was going
not.
to say,
It's
but
not.
they
It's
sure
not
have an
80%.
outsized influence right
It's
now.
not. It's not 80% of the membership, and it won't be
Okay.
in a leadership race. I think there's if you're looking at where there's the biggest number of people who will probably have a role in deciding who the next leader is, I would be looking at the Carpenters Union and IBEW and Leuna and folks like that as having a huge role in it, and much larger than that of the aforementioned. But like all of these things, there are people out there who will run for sure. Uh, if I were Polyev, though, I would be trying to find some captains who can actually help broaden out your leadership offering. And I don't think like the solution is for him to go on Rosie Barton and talk about all the things that he's learned and gotten wrong in life. Don't get me wrong, I don't think that's what you do either. But I think there is a way to soften your image by saying some nice things about other people, right? Instead of fighting with Tim Houston and Doug Ford, maybe say something nice about them. Point to some other things, show where you can,
What about Danielle Smith?
well, obviously, like Danielle's like, but how did he position stuff around the MOU? Like it was contorted, it was unclear. Is he against this?
Inherently critical of her. Inherently critical
But
of her.
this is the problem, like,
right?
because he can't get into the story in the discussion because he seems incapable of accepting the premise of the results of the last election in a full way, right?
Yeah.
Like that's part of it.
I hope somebody up in Ottawa writes this down and puts it on a piece of paper and shows it to him. The leader of the Federal Conservative Party is not in charge of the fucking provincial parties. They're not in charge of them. Okay?
But that's part of the trauma. He went from being the guy who was in the most powerful conservative in the country and a lock to be the next prime minister, and therefore his word was law, to being a guy who's something else.
The following message is brought to you by Unsmoke Canada. Not all nicotine products carry the same risk. Smoke-free alternatives like heated tobacco, vaping products, and nicotine pouches don't burn tobacco or produce smoke. While not risk-free, evidence shows they have the potential to be significantly less harmful than cigarettes. Yet, Canadian regulations restrict access and limit communication about these alternatives, keeping adult smokers in the dark. Sweden has accepted this science, embraced smoking harm reduction, and driven smoking rates below 6%. Canada has the tools to do the same, but it requires political will. It's time to align regulation with science, expand access to smoke-free products, and empower Canadians to make informed choices. The evidence is clear. The opportunity is real. Canada can be smoke-free. Learn more at unsmoke.ca.
I want to throw two more things into this conversation before we have to wrap up. First of all,
people are going to hate this. It's all Polyev.
First of all, just a quick, maybe only you on this, Jordan, unless other people feel strongly. But in deference to the Clune family who hosted me for dinner last night, will Canadians be upset if Carney maneuvers his way into a majority?
No.
I don't think so. Okay. But I will say, because I actually, I think your hosts were quite opposed to floor crossing, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And look, I think that there will be Canadians who view that sort of thing as distasteful, self-serving, insider politics bullshit. And what I dislike about floor crossing is the role that it can play in sort of corroding the sense of transparency and public good and so on, and why people are doing what they're doing politically. So I actually think, and I remember back in the day, the NDP used to have a permanent private members bill to ban floor crossing, which would basically say that if you wish to cross the floor, you got to go sit as an independent, or you have to go and run in a by-election under your new banner.
You can't do that. You can't do
that.
It's
you sure can. You can legislate anything you want, Kory.
No, you can't. No, you can't. That's like, it's such a misunderstanding of like our entire system of government. No, you can't. Like if you want to get into that kind of shit, move south, right? Like we are in a Westminster parliamentary system in which we elect members of parliament who then get to decide what they're going to do. So like you're arguing for a completely different form of government. It's never going to fucking happen. Is it distasteful to people? Yes. Does it happen, going every different direction in parliament and has forever? Yes. Is it ever going to change as long as we're in this system? No. But
Oh, so
this
I
idea you're going
I
to
agree with all that, Kory, but it is a little difficult to defend the Westminster system, given that other than a handful of rural ridings, nobody knows who their member of parliament is, and nobody votes for their member of parliament. They vote for party and leader.
Yeah.
So they have a reasonable expectation that they should be delivered what they voted for.
Yeah, I think the question here is the
but
system being seen to work the way that people value?
Okay. But just you're missing the other point of this. Like when you say that happened, there are very, very few members of parliament that are elected with a majority. So now we're getting into proportional representation and all of that.
Yeah.
You'll have people who, oh, well, everyone around here wanted a conservative, or everyone here around here wanted a liberal, and you pull back the screen on that. It's like, well, maybe 36% of you did. Right? Like it's like, so 2/3 of the electorate actually didn't want that. So like, we're now into splitting hairs, but to say that there's some clean cut argument around this is just absolute horseshit. There isn't. It's just, it is what it is, and look, does it suck when you lose an MP? Absolutely. Does it feel great when you gain one? Absolutely. But is anyone on moral high ground in any of the parties when it comes to this? Absolutely not. Andrew Scheer, who was so outraged about the floor crossing, I had that Leona Aslov, whatever you pronounce her name. Yeah. Another nobody who crossed the floor. He took that nobody who crossed the floor and made her deputy leader. Like that's how fucking absurd.
Yeah, but that is exactly the problem, right? Like,
right. But you've sold. Okay, I want to. Because I think I'm a slight contrarian on this. I agree with you wholeheartedly, actually, Kory. Like cerebrally, I agree with you thoroughly. There is a little bit of spidey sense politically tingling in the back of my neck, and I think this is what it is. There's a qualitative difference to the floor crossing when it delivers, which I think would be unprecedented. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's an era where it occurred, where it delivers you a majority. And I just think that toggle, I think, is going to create a little more scrutiny than we're used to. And here's what I would be worried about if I was advising Carney. His brand is so rooted in, we hired a guy to lead the country to navigate these troubled, unpredictable times. And it is the opposite of a partisan. It is the opposite of a politician. Obviously, he is a partisan. Obviously, he is a politician. But watching him celebrate and then defend this, which looks like political games, to me bleeds and is completely off brand for him. And it's weird. And it's not as going nearly as far as comparing it to the NDP Liberal Pact under Trudeau. But I thought that had a corrosive effect over time. About
floor crossing is different than
I know. I'm just saying. I think vibe wise, it just me. I'd be a little wary if I was.
I think I have an example.
I'd be looking for ways to, you want a majority, but I don't think I would just like wag my finger at the camera and go, ha ha, I pulled one over on everybody and I got this. Suck it if you don't agree. I think there's a little more risk here than we're accommodating.
Was it like 2000 in Saskatchewan or something where the Liberal floor crossers gave Calvert a majority?
Yeah.
Like I don't recall any political price being paid for that.
But I do think.
But I think floor crossing is better. I think floor crossing is probably less politically consequential for parties than these coalition agreements where you're.
Yes,
as evidenced by the NDP's.
But it delivers you a majority. I feel like that's a qualitatively different thing.
Scott is making an important point too about tone for the Prime Minister around this, and the trap, as usual, for the Liberals here is in smugness related to this.
So I just want to stop you for a second, Jordan, and I get a lot of shit, by the way, for interrupting you. So I can anticipate that I'm going to get more shit for this. But unlike the rest of you, I was at the Liberal Caucus Christmas party last week. And I think a good time was had by all, right? But if if the Liberal Party is prone to arrogance, it would appear to me from my interactions that night that the last year has poured accelerant on that fucking personality tendency. The party is fucking full of itself right now. Thinks it's unbeatable, thinks it's brilliant, and thinks that Carney is a magician.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, like I love that from my perspective, because that is absolutely the kryptonite for the Liberal Party. And it is particularly kryptonite, as Scott referred to, for a prime minister who was elected to get away from the partisan games, to get away from as an anti-politician, right? So when he indulges in those sorts of things that people view as gamesmanship, that people view as, any kind of weird, slimy, insidery stuff, it is a negative for him. So I do think they have to watch that very carefully.
And you can see how it's tempting, because he wants to say, central banker, huh? Kiss my ass. Turns out I'm not bad at this political shit too, huh? But that is a bad instinct. I think it's off brand. And I don't know. It makes me a little anxious.
Yeah, I think we're getting too deep into all of that.
Kory is still back on defense of the Westminster system.
All right, so let's move on to some rum and eggnog. All right, let's wrap it up with Mr. Pinsent. Can you please assemble whatever accursed remain after this conversation to hear our hey yous?
Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats. The hey yous are about to begin.
Scott, you got one?
I do. My hey you this week goes out to Scott Reid. And I don't mean the other Scott Reid. I don't mean Giant Tiger Scott Reid. I mean Conservative MP Scott Reid. I mean fat, bloviating, liberal Scott Reid, who appears on the Curse of Politics podcast. Last week, my hey you was sent out to Stephen Guilbeault, congratulating him for taking the high road as he departed the caucus. I think I received somewhere between 117 and 21,000 messages from people after all of you piled onto me, came off the third turnbuckle, elbow crashed me. And many, many, many people were like, what the hell are you talking about? Are you not watching the world as it passes by? And then sure as shit, not a day or two later, Stephen Guilbeault puts an op-ed into the Toronto Star, right, where he, compares the government's position as a fire sale. So my hey you goes out to Scott Reid. That was a really dumb hey you. You're a big mouth moron. Why don't you fucking learn something? Go back to school, Mr. Mouth.
I guess we don't need recall legislation after all.
Awesome. Jordan?
Well, mine is going out to the PMO. Yep, more free advice, friends, for you.
Yeah.
And this time it's about the U.S. ambassador changeover. So I'm certainly not the only one to make this observation, but holy, what a week. So you had the news that Kristen Hillman, who is by all accounts, a very competent, extremely accomplished trade expert. And by the way, one of the few women visibly in a senior advisory role close to the prime minister, announcing her departure. And I actually don't read anything else into that other than it was a logical time for her to make that changeover. And then by all accounts, it seems that the prime minister's office wants to name Mark Wiseman, who, despite zero diplomatic or political experience, appears to have the most important qualification, which is that he has the ear of the PM, and that is fair enough. But they don't actually name him. They just let his name float out there to be attacked, to have oppo done on him, to be, have all kinds of things flung at him, and nothing. They just let it hang out there. So my hey you is to the Prime Minister's office, because I really can't recall a sort of worse handled type of transition like this. If they actually intend to name him, maybe they don't. And this is a very weird way of treating somebody as a trial balloon. But if they do intend to name him, they have now actually wounded him in this as he's coming into that role. So I don't know what's going on over there, but this was extraordinarily incompetent. So that is my hey you to the PMO this week.
That's a good one.
Very good. Kory, what do you got?
I was going to throw a shout out to the BC Conservatives with a little advice on their leadership. I'll also point out as an aside, looks like the shit show in BC politics continues. One BC, one of these splinter parties, two members, one of them has already been removed from the leadership by, it's like just this churn, this endless churn of leadership backbiting and fucking around. I think I'd try to have a fast leadership selection, and I'd probably make the entrance fee as high as I possibly could. To have it be a somewhat limited field, to try to weed out some of the minor players. But with the amount of chaos going on the opposition benches, I think EB would be crazy not to engineer an election in the spring, and I think you got to get ready for it. And so I get to work on figuring out how to get a leader in place as fast as possible, and to try to have it be as mainstream a conversation as possible, where there's a couple of clear choices. So best way to do that is usually a high entrance fee. But anyway, get ready. I think an election's coming, because it's such a fucking shit show on the opposition benches.
Yeah, would be the smart move.
My hey you goes out, perhaps oddly, to Daniel Smith. I did last week sort of a very long dive into the MOU, and I understand it a lot on the Hurley Burley show, and I understand it a lot better than I did before. And it appears to me that she put a lot more water into her wine, both substantively and politically, than I had perhaps understood. And so it actually feels to me, if she lives up to it, like it is a nation-building approach that she took, and it feels like the Federation's a little bit more solid as a consequence of it. So, I mean, I've been sort of calling for her to be that kind of person for a number of years, and so she did it, and my hey goes out to her. And Jordan just fucking wants to say something right now. God almighty, I can see it in her face.
The bar was on the ground, David. That's all I'm going to say.
Nation building that stops at the Rockies, huh, David?
Come on, we got to give a little detail here. Come on.
I'm with you. I think that was an interesting document, man.
I mean, who knows? You may need your own version of Scott's Hey You next week. So
always a possibility.
Look, but isn't that the most, one of the most telling things about it? She is not just put this together and put some water in the wine on that. She is putting her political future on the table over it, and in some ways I think so is Carney, and like that is I think a sign that you had a real negotiation and you had people making real compromises. She's getting booed out of convention. Carney is losing members of his cabinet. That is like people putting some political risk into the equation, and I think it's good for Canada, frankly.
Very good. Very good. And also very good is for all of you accursed out there. We'll be back next week with a Christmas holiday season end of the year wrap up show. So join us again next week. In the meantime, thanks to our sponsors. Thanks to the three of you for being here as always. And thanks to all of you accursed who watched or listened to this show.
And our Christmas show is 2 hours straight of why Polyev is so fucked, right? That's the programming.
And the thing that makes it unique from our normal shows, which is always that, is we're going to be drinking.
Right. Which I'm sure will dull my instincts on how badly off Bill Polyev is.
If you think I'm funny now,
yeah. Kory's not sending the lemon heart over. Yeah, he's just coming right from the bottom.
All right. See you guys later.